No, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, you guys. This is my grandpa, and I'm going to be asking him some questions for this project thing. Okay. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. What was your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory probably goes back to about 1954, 55. I lived in Bellwood, and we had a tree house. I used to climb up in the tree house, and we had a collie dog that would climb up the ladder, and he could climb up there with us, and he was kind of like our babysitter. He could watch us. I had older brothers and sisters, and we would look forward to going fishing down at the Platte River. It's probably 3 miles from Bellwood, and in the summer we would walk the railroad tracks down to the railroad bridge and fish, and when the river was down we would go spearfishing, and that was exciting. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And we also had a frog farm. We would pick up frog eggs in the irrigation ditches and frogs and catch them, and we'd bring them back home. We had this big mud pond behind our shed, and we put screens over it, and we kept the eggs from the frogs and the frogs in there with some water. We always kept it wet, and we had a lot of frogs to go fishing with. That's probably the most fun I had as a kid, and I did that for many years, fishing.
Okay, what was your least favorite memory?
My least favorite memory is probably about the same time my dad was in a bad car accident, and he was partially paralyzed and had amnesia. I think I was 5 or something. He was in a car accident near Bellwood. My youngest brother was just born, and my mom had a lot of stress with the kids, and she went blind from glaucoma. Back then they didn't know what to do for glaucoma, so my dad was in the hospital. My mom went blind, couldn't take care of us, so some of us went and lived with relatives for a while, cousins and grandparents, and it was kind of a hard time for a couple years. And then when my dad got out of the hospital, he couldn't walk. He made a little board with roller skates on it, almost like a skateboard, and he would crawl around on the sidewalk and stuff like that where we lived, and made his kids pull weeds in the yard, and then we'd go swimming. But that was probably my worst memory as a kid.
So moving on from that, what were your high school years like?
My high school years were a lot better. I started out at Silver Creek, Nebraska. We were living there for a while, and in 8th and 9th grade I played football and sports, and I liked sports. Back then we didn't really watch TV and play video games, so everyone was out for sports or worked. And I worked on a farm in the summertime for a couple years for my uncle, and I hated doing that. But we still lived by the river, and I'd go fishing a lot in the summer, and my high school years, probably football, basketball, and track. Then we moved to Lincoln, and when I was a sophomore, and I played football at Lincoln High. My sophomore year I was on reserves. I was a punter and a running back and a linebacker, and we won all of our games, I think, my sophomore year when I was on reserves. And then when I was on varsity, I hurt my knee a week before our first game, and I was on crutches for 6 weeks, so I never got to play. I would have probably been the punter and maybe a second string running back and a defensive end. So I never played. Kind of got out of shape, gained about 10, 12 pounds during the year because I couldn't do anything. Last game of the year, I think I got to suit up, but I never played much. And then I went out for track, and I did the pentathlon, and I set the record in the pentathlon at Lincoln High. I tore a groin broad jumping, and it never healed. It took about 5 years. But my senior year, I still played football, and never told the coach.
So,
Kept injuring my groin. I just couldn't pull off my left foot. I couldn't kick. So I started as a right halfback for Lincoln High, and that was 1970. But our 69 team, we were state champs. That was high school. My favorite classes are probably architecture, mechanical drafting.
what did you do? Why did you choose? Why did you have those classes?
Actually, I probably liked, when I was in grade school, I didn't like school much because we moved a lot. But when in high school, I was kind of artistic, so I liked the drafting, architecture, mechanical drafting, electronics. All those things are just new to all the kids. And
Why'd you like those classes?
if I studied, I didn't have to study as hard. It just kind of came natural. I just enjoyed making things and drawing, so I like that.
Why'd you
And I
like it?
had 3 years of mechanical drafting, then I had an advanced architecture class, and I just liked it, and an electronics class. And then I was like a student teacher helper my senior year, and I got credits for that for drafting.
So, why did you have some of those classes?
Why did I have those classes?
Yeah.
Because that's what I liked.
I like those classes. And what did you take mechanical and drafting and just regular drafting for?
What did I take it for?
Yeah.
Because I took mechanical drafting. I was just good at it. I could do the drawings fast, and I always helped my grade average because I get them 1. But I could probably do a drawing in maybe 15-20 minutes, where other kids took a week just to figure them out. So that's kind of stuff I was really good at. I was a horrible speller, so I never liked the classes where you had to write or spell and things like that, because I'd have to look up all the words, and it took a long time. But drafting, electronics, things like that kind of came natural. I wanted to learn architecture because I wanted to be a house builder and kind of stay, that was kind of my plan. Was I worked a lot of jobs in high school and helped people in construction, and I was taking architecture, and I was good at, kind of naturally could read a blueprint even without taking too many classes. I was good at that. So that was my high school, I guess. What's next?
So, after high school, what did you do? Since I know you were in the military and everything, what was the military like for you?
Well, after high school, I was planning on going to college, but we never had a lot of money, and they had the Vietnam draft going on, so it was kind of a scary time. I worked for Cushman's for a while, and then I was drafted. My number was 5, and I don't know if you people back then knew, they would draw a number like September 14th, and if that number came up, that would be the first people that went to the draft. You'd have 165 birthdays, and all those people had to show up at the draft board. And if your number was 1, you would show up first when they called the first round. Everybody's birthday that was September 14th would show up at the draft board, and they would go right into the Army or the military, or you could join the Navy or Air Force before you had to go, if you could get in. I was working at Cushman's. I was drafted, so I went to Milford and applied, and I got into school there, and they gave me a 1/4 deferment, so that was nice. And then I was taking drafting, but I wasn't too motivated then. I just went to school to get out of the Army there for a while. So I ended up, after that quarter, going into Army. I went into Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. It was scary for everyone because we all thought we were going to Vietnam. And this was probably 1972, right around in there. I remember going through basic and then getting my papers for school, and a lot of my class that I went to basic went to infantry, and I went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and I was really lucky. That was communication school, electronics. I had electronics in high school, and when I was in the Army I took a test, and apparently I was remembered something like what resistors and capacitors on the test were, and could do a little bit of electronics on that test, and ended up at Fort Monmouth, and I was one of only 2 people that was ever drafted that got to go to Fort Monmouth, so that was kind of like an honor to go there. 17-week school. My brother lived in New Jersey, so that was nice, and that was in Fort Monmouth was in New Jersey, so I got to go see him on the weekends. And then it was nice that we went to school in the evening. In the daytime we could do what we wanted, and on the weekends we would leave. Like Friday night after school you could go wherever you wanted, and you had to show up for Monday morning for a check.
Yeah.
That was about it. Check in on Monday morning. Then from Fort Monmouth, you still didn't know you could still go to Vietnam. And I was a microwave communications repairman, but my papers sent me to Germany. Originally I started out at Schweizigen, and at first looked at it, I didn't read it right. I thought it was Switzerland, so I was really excited, but it was Schweizigen, Germany. Which is about the same. If you would have went, people that went to Switzerland never had to wear their uniforms. You were non-combat MOS civilian status.
Yeah.
And I could have had that, but I ended up going. I was stationed in I was in Stratcom, and I went to Company A for a while before going to a radio station, which was 5 miles from Belgium and about 5 miles from Holland. So it was nice. I ended up there for a couple weeks, and then I ended up going to Darmstadt, Norvenich, Germany. Was a huge German Air Force base, and there was 4 or 5 Army guys there, and we were communications. It was like an underground nuclear missile base. Nobody really knew it. You had to have a secret clearance to work there, and we ran the radios, and if somebody was attacking us, we would make these radio checks, and then we'd push a button on the wall.
So how was
for the Air Force.
How was it like pushing the button? Was it scary, or was it really easy for you?
Yeah, no, it was kind of like a job where you sit there for 45 minutes, and you could read or do whatever you wanted. You listen to the radio, and they would check on you every 45 minutes. And one of the secrets back then, it was like a code, was Zulu time. And Zulu time is a time that's set, it's the same all over the world. So if it's 12 o'clock midnight in Germany on Tuesday, it's 12 o'clock midnight in Omaha, Nebraska on Tuesday. Everybody's under the same time zone, same time. And one of the secrets was, after you made your radio check, you would ask the person that called you what time it was, and they would give you the standard time, like let's say 12:30 p.m. German time. Okay, I'm telling you that wrong. They're supposed to give you the Zulu time, but if they give you the regular time, and you're supposed to push this button, Well, after working there for about 6 months, I had a radio check, and I said, "Sir, what time is it?" And he says, "Oh, it's about 10:35, 10:30." I said, "Sir, what time is it?" And it was not Zulu time. He said, 10:30. That was our standard time. I said, "Sir, what time is it?" He says, "About 10:30, 10:35. I said, "Thank you, sir," and I pushed that button. This was in Norbenitz, Germany. All these lights went out, sirens went on, and you could hear jets taking off. It was really a scary time for about 10 minutes. I didn't know for sure if the guy made a mistake or if they were testing me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have pushed the button, but it was a big deal. I didn't get in trouble. The guy that gave me the wrong time did. Other than that, a good moment was when I was stationed there. I used to draw pictures of guys' girlfriends, life size, 5'2", and their wives, and they would be laying like on the bed. And I did that for 4 or 5 people there. And when we had a German sergeant in the German Air Force and the Army, and he said that we were going to have an inspection, that the officers from headquarters were going to come up next week, and it would be good if I got those pictures off the wall, but I left them on there. And when they came up and inspected us, they said, "Who's responsible for these drawings?" And I says, "I am, sir." And they said, "Can you do drafting?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I want to be a draftsman." When I was drafted, I was hoping I could be a draftsman. And he says, "Well, we're looking for a guy like you at headquarters," and they sent me to Darmstadt to be the draftsman. So I ended up going to
What does a draftsman do?
At that time, I did everything. I drew schematics, which is electronic, kind of like a circuit board, but we would shoot, let's say we had different atmospheres where you would shoot a radio wave up into the atmosphere and ricochet it back down, and you had to I kind of drew different graphs and stuff where the signal would go, different things like just pictures like that, and charts, mostly charts. Government uses charts for everything. Did a lot of signs, nothing too difficult. I did do a couple architectural drawings, small ones for additions on our company, and some rooms inside. And I like doing this, so I spent a lot of my own time after work and working on that. And then that same year I went on leave and came home and got married to my high school girlfriend, and she came back to Germany with me, and we traveled a lot. We went to Paris and Belgium and Amsterdam, drove over the North Sea, ended up in a little town called Little, Germany. It's by Oldenburg, and that's where my grandparents came from when they were 8 or 9 years old. And the house that my grandfather, the farm they lived on, was still there. And there was a guy named Henry. He was from Columbus, and he was a friend of my grandfather, and they're the ones that bought the farm. It still had a kind of like a grass roof. You came in the house, and it was like the cows and stuff would be in the first part where they fed them, and a hay loft above, and then you went into the kitchen, and then the bedrooms were in the back. But they still had that same house. They were building a new one though. That was in the 73 probably, or 72. That was kind of fun. Took some pictures there. I went to the Cologne Cathedral in Germany, and Cologne was a really beautiful city to visit. Went to Heidelberg, seen Heidelberg Castle, seen a lot of castles on our trips. Heidelberg was one of the better castles. And then I lived in Darmstadt off post. and I stayed there for about 6 months, and then came home and had it early out because Vietnam War was over, so I got out a few months early. That was my military experience. And what's the next question?
Well, now we're going on to just random things other than military. So, what was like the most important achievement that you had during life?
Achievement?
Yep.
Probably building my own house. I think that's what I always wanted to do because I moved a lot as a kid and I wanted to stay in the same area. And in 1974-5, I was a paint contractor, but I would always, in new construction, I would talk to all these contractors building these new houses back then, what they charged, and I would ask questions and kind of got an idea what it cost. And I think in 75 I built a brick home in the Colonial Hills.
How long did it take you to build that home?
6 months. I never did a lot of the work myself. I contracted it all out. I did my deck and roof, and I did the trim carpenter work and finished the painting and things like that. And that house sold. I drew the blueprint for it, and it was a walkout with a lot behind me. I bought my lot from Commonwealth, and at that time I had been working for the Copples as a painter, Clayton House and out at the beach, doing some jobs for them, and they sold me a lot really for $5,000 there. Built my house with a walkout basement. Bennett Martin was kind of, there was a small lake there in Bennett Martin. His house was like on the other side of this lake, which most people wouldn't even recognize nowadays. I lived there for about 8 years. The economy got really bad, and I had a rental house. Sold that house, moved into my rental house, and built a new house in Fox Hollow, and I was the last person to buy a lot from Commonwealth. They were getting closed down, and bought this lot here in Fox Hollow for $5,000 and built the house here and did about the same thing. Nobody had any work, so I had it built really cheap, probably $50,000-$60,000 contracting it out. I didn't trim this one, I just painted it. That's about all I did on it, and finished maybe part of the basement.
How many houses did you build?
Those are kind of the main two. My father-in-law took some of my bids, and they built a house for, kind of had an idea. He would come around, when I was working, and he would watch the house for me, and so he did the same thing and built a house for his son. And it came out okay, and then he tried it again for somebody else, and it cost a lot of money because they were changing things. Yeah. But both of my houses I made a lot of money on. I think the house we're living in now I built for 1981. I built this house for $60 and it was worth $140. Now it's worth about $220, $250 maybe, $250,000. So that's a lot of equity.
Yeah.
And the money I used to build this house with is from the first house I sold. I made enough money to build this house.
That's cool.
And what was the question?
Like, what was the most important achievement?
Yeah, that was probably the most important achievement because that was kind of my goal in life. So by the time I was 40 years old, I had my house paid for and had refinanced it again a few times.
So did you build this house?
Yeah, this is the house.
Okay, so how many years have you been living in this house?
Lived in this house for 32 or 3 years.
So, what was something that you did to help someone else?
Probably when I lived in my first house, we had a lake behind our house, and 3 kids, I was looking out the window, and 3 kids were walking across the ice in the spring, and I was watching them, and all of a sudden I seen them go through the ice all at the same time. And I had like a pair of pants on and a t-shirt, no shoes or anything. I just ran out there, checked the ice. I kind of like broke it with my hand to see if I could get to them, and I got out there and I pulled them all in. Um, First two girls pulled them out, and it was really windy and cold. And then the boy, he would kind of get halfway out of the water and then he'd fall back in, like trying to climb out. And I kind of laid down, got a hold of his hand, pulled him out, pulled him up to where we could walk. And they went in the house. My wife was there, and the boy was like blue, pure blue almost. His feet and his face and hands are blue. We took their clothes, we gave them other clothes, they changed their clothes, and we washed and dried all their clothes and called the parents. And the boy, we called the ambulance because he looked bad, and he didn't want us to because his dad was a fireman. He was scared, and the fire department did come out there. And that was kind of a big deal back then. Other accomplishments, probably we had 7 kids. I had 5 kids by my first wife that I was married to, and then she died when my last son was born. And my boys were like, I don't even remember. There's kind of like 2 years here where I'm kind of like blank, where I can't remember things from the shock. But we had 5 kids, 1 baby, and the boys were like 3, 5, and 6, and had a 11-year-old girl, or 10-year-old, and then a couple years later I remarried to Claudia, and she had 2 girls, so we had 7 kids under 12. And it seemed hectic. We were busy. I mean,
Who was your favorite child? Not to be mean, but
my favorite child, I would never say there was a favorite child.
There's always a favorite child, though.
I liked them all the same.
Sure.
Some of them were worse than others. Some were nightmares. But you have so many kids and you're so busy. Your life is just taking them to school and picking them up and go to school conferences. That's all you did. So if there was a real problem, you never had time to worry about it. It was the little things that you had to do every day that kept you busy. The greatest moment was when they could all dress themselves. That was my favorite memory. All of them could tie their shoes, and that was nice.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, with those kids, we had one daughter that won a scholarship to the University of Japan.
Which one was that?
Crystal. She was going to the University of Nebraska. She spoke 5 languages. She ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Japan, but she didn't take it. She ended up getting married. And she lives in Redmond, and her husband works for Microsoft. So it helps to study and meet somebody at the library. And then a son, Ryan, won Serotonin Award at East for drama, and another daughter won a Serotonin Award for art. And then I had a brother that won the Serotonin Award for sports, and his son won it for academics. So that's quite a compliment for the kids, but we had some kids that were probably just the opposite too of those, but we love them all the same.
No, you don't.
Yeah, we do. Some just make us angrier,
Yeah.
especially grandkids.
Oh, whatever.
Because grandmas spoil them, and I don't. I treat them all the same.
Yeah, no, you don't. So it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean you don't love us.
But no. So what's the next question?
What would you do if you had a time machine, and why?
Well, I think I would go back a few hundred years. I'd rather go backwards with my knowledge of life today because you'd be very intelligent. Even though I'm probably not, but going back a couple hundred years, they would think I was. I could do a lot.
Yeah.
I have a lot of knowledge. You could stop pollution and crime, and you could do a lot. And I guess you could make it a better place to live.
Mm-hmm. Well, if
And
you're done, then we're done because
this
that was
is
the
it?
last question. So yeah.
Oh, good.
Really awkward. Okay, we're done here. Now this.
Okay.
Question.